This is a hawthorn bush. This is one of the, usually it has berries on it in the wintertime, but the strong winds have blown all of these off. You can eat them. You can eat the outer part of them, but they have a big seed that's divided into that'll go into 4 parts. It's like a pumpkin, and it's not very big, but you can chew on it and spit the seeds out. This was one of the berries that was survival food for the little ones and the people that had a village destroyed, and it was one of the only berries they could eat besides rosebush or rose hips. The Cheyennes call this bearberry. At a time when 2 warriors, 2 hunters, riding horseback, 2 Cheyennes they came around this brush and their horses spooked, and when they were able to control their horses, they tied them and they snuck back up to see what had spooked the horses, and they found out it was a prairie grizzly, and that grizzly was eating these berries. The red berries of the hawthorn. So they went back and mounted their horses and made a big circle, one around him. So they were scared of the bear. And they went on their way hunting. And on their return trip, they decided to go and check on the bear, see if he was still there. Because he was close to camp, and they didn't want the bear around. When they rode up close to the brush, the horses were spooked, so they tied them again, and they snuck up on the bear, and they heard this roaring. It was a great noise. When they got up close to it, that bear was tearing at its stomach with its claws. It was ripping its stomach open. And it would roar and scream, and they watched him, and that bear was tearing at his stomach. What had happened was the bear had ate all them berries and swallowed the seeds, and them seeds started to swell in its stomach. It eventually burst one of the linings in the stomach, and the bear had taken its own life by ripping its stomach open. That is why the Cheyennes gave the hawthorn the name bearberry. The kinnikinick, the tobacco plant, is also can be called bearberry. It has you can pick it in the winter time. You always have to know where it lives. You just move the snow, and the kinnikinick or bearberry will have little red berries on it, and you can harvest the leaves of that tobacco plant, because they're real sacred, and they have to be included in all of our ceremonial tobacco. They're called nuistuts. They have to be mixed with red willow and regular tobacco, but that's another bearberry. A lot of times it was an honor to be named after such a fierce animal, and they've always they told great stories of the hawthorn bush and the berry and the bear that tore its stomach open to try to get rid of the pain. That's our story of the hawthorn.
Knuckle minced. Knuckle minced. Knuckle minced. There's a story about these 2 sisters. Their camp was attacked And usually it was customary for sisters to marry the same man if they chose another wife. That way they could always have harmony in the lodge because they were sisters. Well, one of our villages got destroyed and was attacked by soldiers, and the husband told them to take the kids and run off before the soldiers could catch them. He says, "I'll hold them back." They tried to beg him to come with them, but he wouldn't do it. He says, "No, you go, you head up towards the where the Cheyennes are camped. You know, one of them villages up there." He says, "Try to find them." And he says, "I'll hold the soldiers off while you get away. Take the kids." And they wanted it. They didn't want to go, but he made them leave. And as he fought the soldiers, one of the soldiers busted his leg, and he sat down on the ground, but he continued to fight. So the two sisters and their two children had their buffalo robes, and they started running. They got away from the soldiers, and on their way they ran for half of the night and until they could hide somewhere. And then they would bend over willows along the streams, and they would put one buffalo robe over the top, and they would take the other buffalo robe and put it inside for the kids and everybody to lay on. And it was in the winter time, and they continued living that way. About the fifth day, they were hungry. They had ran out of food. Their moccasins were getting wore out. At that time, a great wolf showed up, and it would walk alongside of them as they were traveling. And they were scared of it at first. It was a great wolf, and they continued to walk, and the wolf stayed on the side of them. And when they would camp at night by the willows and make their lodge, the wolf would lay outside the door. They were still scared of him. The next day, they would travel again. This was a time when the kids would start to whine because they were hungry. There was no food. The only berries they could get were bearberries, the only bearberries and rose hips. And sometime they might stumble on a wild turnip that the stem was still sticking out of the ground. They continued to walk, and eventually one of the ladies went up and talked to the wolf and told him, he says, "My family, my children are crying at night. They want something to eat." Says, "Can you get us some food? Can you show us where there's some food?" So the wolf just, they continued to walk, and pretty soon the wolf leaves, and he heads down over the hills. They travel all morning, and late that afternoon, the wolf comes back. His muzzle is covered with blood, and he's like a pup. He's barking at them, and he was jumping up and down. And when they get close to him, he runs off, and he barks at them again. He's trying to get them to follow him. Eventually, they do follow him, and he goes up stands on this hill, and as they come up close to him, he's barking, and when they reach the top of the hill, they see a whole circle of wolves surrounding a buffalo that they had killed. And they weren't eating this buffalo. They were just sitting in a circle. The wolf ran down towards led them to the circle of wolves. When they got near the buffalo, the circle opened, which allowed them to go inside. And they took their knives and they cut out some liver and kidney. And this is what they ate raw. It gives, Indian people used to eat it raw to give them strength. And they ate the liver and the kidneys, and the kids got full, and they took some of the choice cuts of meat and took a big piece of the hide, because that was what they were going to make their moccasins with. So they made a big bundle after their hunger was satisfied. They made a big bundle, and one of the women carried it, and they continued on their journey. In the meantime, the wolves, all that were in a circle, they all attacked the buffalo, and they were growling and fighting with each other, and they consumed the buffalo. These four people they continued on their way, and the next day they cut up their meat and dried it. They staked out the buffalo hide, and it was a rest time. They found a bare ground, that area that they could that reflected the sun, where it was warm. They got out of the wind. They stretched the hides and dried them as best they could, and they tanned them and made moccasin soles with the buffalo hide, and fixed their moccasins, repaired them. And the wolf had left the other band of wolves, and he would sit with them. He would lay down, and so they continued on their way. As they walked for many, many days, and as they depleted their food again, this one of the wives spoke to the wolf again and said, the children are crying again. We've walked a great distance. We need more food. So the wolf runs off. That afternoon he comes back again, and he's barking on the hill. So when they walk towards the wolf, when they get to the top of the hill, they see an abandoned Cheyenne village. At that time, it was customary that some families that had their sons out hunting or on a war party, they would always leave food where their lodge poles were. They would leave some lodge poles hanging, or leave them there, and they would hang extra food in case their son or the warriors came back and needed something to eat. The wolf had a piece of meat in his mouth, which he dropped at the foot of the woman, and he ran down to the old abandoned campsite. And they followed him, and there was a big sack of dried meat and fat and different things in there. And they got down and they made a camp there. They were happy again. After a couple days of rest, they continued on their journey. They were camped near a canyon, and they had made a lodge with willows again. And they heard this wolf started to growl. It was so it would howl, and it was calling all the wolves. And you could hear the wolves answering in the distance. And they all ran down towards the canyon. And they got in a fight with an animal. They always thought it was a big bear, one of the grizzlies, the prairie grizzlies. The wolves fought it, and it scared the women and children, so they tore their lodge down and grabbed their robes and what the food they had, and they rushed off into the night. After they were a great distance from the canyon, they again slept on the ground and covered themselves with a robe. In the morning, that wolf returned, and it was chewed up, and you could see where some fur was missing. It had been in a great fight. So they continued. After several days, they ran out of food again. And this time, the times were real desperate. There had been some blizzards, and the kids they were kind of on their last leg, so to speak. So this lady went and talked to the wolf, and she says, "We're looking for my people. They live here somewhere. They have a village. They're supposed to have a village here. This is where we used to camp when I was a little girl." She says, "We camped all along here." So the wolf ran off. Again that afternoon, he came back, and he was barking in a distance, and they went towards him. When they got to the top of the hill, they noticed the Cheyenne village down below. That wolf was jumping like a pup. He was so happy. He stayed there, and the woman and children went down to the Cheyenne Lodge, and everybody was so happy to see them. Their relatives were there. They were crying over them. They were happy to see them, and they fed them. They had a great feast for them. The woman that had talked to the wolf, she took food and went back up on the hill, and she fed the wolf. And she says, she thanked the wolf. She said, you brought us to our family. We're safe now. You can go on your way. She fed the wolf. She left the food there, and he wouldn't eat it, and he just stood over it. And she went on down to the village, and looking back, she would see the wolf eating the meat. And after it had ate, the wolf ran off to be a wolf again. This woman was living on a reservation in 1902. She was one of the only women that was given a second name. And because of her friendship with the wolf, the warriors named her Wolf Friend, because of the great story that she told. She had great powers. She could communicate with animals, with wolves. But many Cheyenne campfires told of this wonderful story of survival, of eating the bearberries, the rose hips, digging plants that they found through the snow at times. That's the story of two great women that brought their children to safety. Wolf Friend was her name. Nod.